Morning, children. This is science period. We are in chapter 6, and the name of the chapter is Physical and Chemical Changes. Today is the fifth part of the same chapter. Children, yesterday we were talking about the chemical changes, and when we talked about the chemical changes, we took some examples that of baking of cake, process of photosynthesis, then burning of the fuel. So all these were considered to be your chemical changes. Apart from these changes, there were few changes which were given in your book along and they were setting of the curd from the milk, then photosynthesis, process of digestion, and the rotting of banana. What is a chemical change? So that we know, a chemical change is a change in which new or more new substances are formed. These substances can be in one substance or can be many substances at the same time. A chemical change is also called a chemical reaction. Why reaction? Because one product, one reactant changes to another product, and so some reaction is carried out. During a chemical change, all the new substances are formed, and such type of reaction is also irreversible in nature. Irreversible changes means the permanent changes that cannot be undone. That is baking of your cake. Once the cake is baked, we cannot get the raw material back. Then frying of your egg. Once the egg is fried, we cannot get the same egg back. Changing of either burning of the paper into ash. Once we get the ash out of the paper, that paper cannot be back again. So these are some of the irreversible changes. Apart from that, we even talked about the rusting of the iron. And this is also a chemical change. As we talked of that iron here get reacted with water and oxygen and forms iron oxide. So this is the process which goes on during the rusting of iron. Children, rusting of iron. What is rusting of iron? That we have also talked of in one of the period when we started with the chapter. It is one of the change which affects the iron articles and then slowly and slowly destroys them and leads to the monetary loss. Why we say it's a monetary loss? Because when we buy something and when it gets wasted, that means we are wasting our money. So it is considered to be a monetary loss. So these iron metal, when gets reacted with oxygen and water, they undergo the process of rusting, and thus these articles are destroyed. As you know, iron is used for making the bridges, ships, cars, truck bodies, many of our vehicles, many of the appliances that we use in our home, in our day-to-day life, and many other articles. So, all these undergoes the process of rusting, and this is also known as corrosion. So the question is, what is corrosion? When a metal is exposed to the moisture, to the air, to the water, to the acid means here salts, etc., for some time, then what happens? A layer of oxide is formed which weakens the metals, and hence metals are said to be corroded, and this is the whole process which is called as corrosion. So corrosion is same to that of your rusting. Just now I talked some of the iron articles, that was your bridges. So many of our bridges in the ancient time were made of your iron even today, but now they have been coated with many of the other metals and non-metals. This is your ship which got corroded, either rusted, the cars, and the bodies of your truck. Even the chain that we use, this is a part of your, okay, that means your bike. Okay, so now on one side you can see that is your B part, you can see in the figure, that is not the rusted one, and A part is the bike came in contact with the air and moisture, it got rusted. If you remember the experiment that we have done, in which we took the copper sulfate, okay, and we took its color was your dark blue color, and then later on we added iron nail into it and left it for some time. So what happened, that copper sulfate got changed up, and when it got changed up, what happened, it gave a green color and changed to iron sulfate. And later on we found that the copper got deposited on the metal iron. So it was your chemical change. So we can say, for rusting, the presence of both oxygen and water is essential. So rusting takes place, as I said, in the presence of water, in the presence of iron and oxygen. Iron is the metal on which this water and oxygen, they react. And when they react, they give a new product, and that new product is your iron oxide. So this is what is your process of rusting in equation form. Here you can see a car which is exposed to the sunlight, either you can say to the air and the water for some time. So this car got rusted. In fact, if the content of the moisture in the air is high, which means if it is more humid, then the rusting will be faster. So that is why the ships that are there in the ocean and in the seas, they become, either they get rusted or corroded, because here the content of the salt is in much more amount. Here again you can see, when this nail was left in the copper sulfate solution, it slowly and slowly, here you can see the change in the color of the water. That means slowly and slowly it is changing into iron sulfate. Okay, so here the changes, and the nail is becoming brown in color. Now, what are the conditions for the corrosion? As we have already studied that oxygen and water are necessary, but there are few conditions in which this corrosion will not take place, either this rusting will not take place. In the first one, in the first test tube, we found what? There is a boiling water, but we have put a cork over it. So there is no oxygen now here in it. So since there is no oxygen, that means the process of rusting will not take place. In the second one, we have taken the tap water. It is not covered, it is all opened, so normally the oxygen can enter. So here also the rusting will take place. Third one, here in the test tube we have the salt, we have water, and even we have the oxygen. So here also the process of rusting is taking place normally. In the fourth test tube, here we have the moist air and the oxygen along with water. So here also the process of rusting is taking place. Whereas in the fifth one, what is happening is, in the fifth one, we have covered it with a cork, and secondly here we have the dried air, okay, because there is no water inside. So such type of reaction will not take place, and this type of test tube, in this test tube there will be no process of corrosion. So here we can say, in two of the conditions we found what? There was no corrosion process, either no rusting process. Now how do we can prevent this rusting? When any of the iron surface can be protected from the rusting by preventing it from coming in contact with the air and water. So how it can be done is coating the iron surface with the oil, grease or paint. This is the normal method. Second one, by depositing a layer of the zinc on the iron surface, and the process which is done is called the galvanization. The third one is forming an alloy of iron by the chemically combination of certain metals or non-metals, so which do not gather rust. So these are the three ways in which we can prevent rusting. So here again we will be taking up one by one all the three. So preventing the iron articles from coming in contact with the oxygen or water or both. So one simple way, as I said, is your painting or covering it with a grease. In fact, these coats should be applied regularly to prevent the rusting. Here you can see the moving part of a machine or woodworking tools are not painted or coated with the plastic. The paint or the plastic would be scattered. They are protected from rusting by oiling or greasing, and these serves as a lubricant. Bicycle gears and chains, you might have seen after the rainy season you often go to the bicycle mender and you get it done. You get the oiling and the greasing done over there, so that as to prevent your bicycle from getting rusted or corroded. This is one of the way of your galvanization, where you are coating it, the iron metal, with any of the zinc. So this is your galvanization process. Here again you can see an screw, which is a brass screw made up of brass. So here again you can see how you can bimetallic corrosion is taking place. So here you can just see how the process is taking place. On one side here you can see it is got corroded, but here on the other side it is not corroded. It is just because of the process of galvanization. Here you can see again the screw, as well as, so one screw is your normal screw and the other one is your galvanized screw, and then the sheds. So here the tin sheds are there and these sheds are galvanized, so it can be protected after galvanization. Moreover, ships which are made up of iron and a part of them remains under the water, on the part above the water bodies drops keeps clinging to the ship's outer surface. Why this happens is because the ship, which is in water, and within in water, the sea water, there is a content of the salt, and the salt water makes the process of rusting very faster. As I said, acid plays a very important role. So for the process of corrosion, here we can say there are few of the preventive measures and your examples which I got for you. Coat with the layer of paint. Okay, so here we are doing it for many of the bodies of your vehicles, that is car and many of the other appliances. Coating with the oil or the grease is done in your bicycles, in your bikes, etc. Galvanizing with the zinc is done in your nail, in your buckets, etc. Alloys which we use, so here one of the alloy, the most common one is your stainless steel, which we use for making the cutlery. Apart from that, the watches that we wear, here also we are using an alloy. Then comes the electroplating method, which is done in your jewelry. Then your use of sacrificial protection, which we do for the ships. So when we are talking of the ship, so here, as I said, in the sea, the content of the salt is quite much, so the ships get corroded very fast in the sea. So therefore now ships suffer a lot of damage from the rusting in spite of being painted. So much of the fraction of the ships, the iron has to be replaced every year, and lot of money is wasted in that. As we were talking of the alloy, what is an alloy? Alloy is the mixture of a metal and a non-metal. It can be in a proportionate ratio, or it varies. So here when we are talking of a stainless steel, which is made by mixing an iron with the carbon and the metals like the chromium, nickel and the manganese, so it does not get rusted. So here you can see how it does not get rusted, because it makes a cover, it gets a coating, okay, of these metals, and thus the process of rusting does not take place because it does not comes in contact with the oxygen. Here you can see a watch which is made up of stainless steel, so it is an alloy. Now, can you imagine the monetary loss that the world faces just because of it? So yes, it should be our pledge now to save the nation's wealth. So, save iron from getting rusted. So, the recap of the entire session, first is we had talked about rusting, we talked about the prevention of rusting. So, a question for you, how can we prevent rusting? Hope so that it is clear to you. Thank you, Sairam.